Hey team, welcome into this post-season Warriorholic special here. I'm joined by New Zealand sports media legend and fellow Upper Hutt old boy, Mr. Martin Devlin. Welcome to the show, Martin.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, mate.
Oh, it's awesome to have you on, mate. It's been a pleasure to have a banter with you every Monday over the season on It's Only Sport there on platform.kiwi or ThePlatform.kiwi. For those of
Yeah.
you who don't know, that's how we find Martin these days. Monday to Thursday, 1 to 4, I believe, coming to you live from France from next week, is it?
Yeah, we're off to the World Cup Saturday week. So, yeah, about another week's work and away we go. Just in time for the build-up to the quarterfinal.
Oh man, awesome! And yeah, it's quite funny actually that Martin and I have sort of been chatting online for years through his days back at Radio Sport, but we actually met just the day after the All Blacks went down to the English in Japan at the last World Cup. So that's kind
We
of
did.
ironic.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully you have a bit more of a pleasant journey this year with the All
Mate, I'm a
Blacks.
jinx already, mate. I've been to losing semi-finals before, a couple of them, so...
So yeah, anyway, we'll get back onto the Warriors. So what I wanted to do is get Martin on here. Like I said, it's been great to have a chat every Monday there for about 5 or 10 minutes on what my take was on the Warriors every week. But I thought, he's a passionate sports fan as much as he is a journalist or a media personality. So I'd love to get some of his thoughts about how the Warriors went this season. From a personal perspective, but later on I'll get into it. Sort of in the media, how he saw the fan engagement start to grow throughout the season, whether he saw a difference in the calls they were getting, but also like from the outside looking at how particularly the crowds went at Mount Smart. But we'll start off, before we get into the Warriors, I know you're a man of many sports. You love your EPL, your American football, you love your rugby, but how did your days with rugby league begin, my man?
Look, actually, in Upper Hutt, Wakatiki Street, which was over the back fence of where we lived at Kia Grove, and that's where the Tigers were. They were based there. And so I remember as a 6-year-old kid going around bare feet for their trials, and I got told, best you run along to athletics, son. I was a little bit skinny. But yeah, so my first rugby league was watching them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same as me. My dad was good mates with Gary Stokes and Graham Stokes. And Graham Stokes was one of those crazy Tigers sort of fans back in the day, kind of up son to the Mad Butcher. So I remember going down there and watching them at Wakatiki Street. And Morven Edwards actually went to Marrowbank Primary School where I went. So he went over to Balmain. So that's one of the reasons I jumped on
That's
them
where
back
we
in the
moved
day.
to, Zane. We moved to Marty Bank, and KT, Kevin Tamati, worked at Dunlop's with Mum, and Dunlop's Tyre Factory is now the big brewery thing that they have out there in Upper Hutt.
Right.
Okay, yeah, converted it to that. And I used to play squash with him, and I never really knew who he was until 1985 when I saw him brawling with Greg Dowling during that test. It was like, wow, that's Kevin. That's Kevin who I play squash with. So I kind of knew who he was, but I just didn't know, if you know what I mean.
I mean, it's funny, like, because a lot of younger fans who were maybe born in the 90s or later wouldn't realise that Upper Hutt had half the Kiwis in their team back in the day. Kevin Tamati, Sediru, and who else did we have there?
Steve Kearney came through, didn't he? Didn't he come through?
Steve Kearney, yep.
Yeah.
Actually, Nelson, the
I think Sammy
Sophomonies.
Stewart was playing for, might have been Randwick in those days.
Yep.
Yeah.
We had the Lomaxes from Wainui and Adrian Shelford. I think he might have been from Upper Hutt as well. So, back in the day, we had a strong team. So it was a natural kind of progression for me to go over to the Tigers at Balmain because they had the same jersey. But I believe you were a Balmain fan as well back before the Warriors.
I was a Balmain fan too. Look, to be honest, I kind of really picked up the league in 1989 when we had, for the first time, we had that Winfield Cup program on a Monday night. You used to get like the highlights or main one game, and then you got little chunks of every other game. And that was a Balmain side, of course, with Big Block. It had Paul Ciro, you had Mick, you had Benny, you had the Wiz, Gary Freeman playing. And my brother was living in Sydney, been there for about 15 years or something. And so him and all his mates were all Balmain fans. So when I used to go over and see them, I was a little brother. So I was pine time. I wasn't allowed actually, off the bench for the real fixtures. I was allowed to come along to Balmain, to Leichhardt, but I was running beers and I was getting pies and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's why I was called pine time. And so kind of from there, I just became a fan of that team because I suppose that they were there. Plus, also Gary was one of my favourite players ever, So, and then when they merged with West, and I hated West, man. I hated Parramatta, I hated Penrith, and so I just couldn't get with that merger. And that was kind of convenient because the Warriors had already formed at that stage, because I think the mergers happened around 96, 97, something like that, with the Super League war. So at that stage, I said, no, I'm living in New Zealand. I'll support this team.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of before the Warriors, I drifted between clubs like once the Wiz and the likes of Wayne Pearce, and that
Oh,
moved
great
on.
player, great player.
I ended up going across to Manly there when Graham Lowe was there for a while with all the Kiwis there that
And
Māori
Richie,
were
yeah,
there, and
yeah.
yeah. I think I spent a bit of time at the Knights when Tony Kemp and Adrian Shelford were there, but
Johnny
similar
Schuster
to
played for them as well, I
yeah,
think.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, another great name. So yeah, 95 was just a natural progression for me, and it was funny, it was clearly the Auckland Warriors back in those days, but being part of New Zealand, you couldn't help but jump on it.
Plus,
Um,
of course, I'm old enough to remember that the Sorensens went over there first, and I think Dane went to Cronulla. And also, Mark Graham, probably my favourite ever player, was playing for the North
yeah,
Sydney Bears. And so I even had a soft spot for the Bears, to be honest. So it was just where the
yeah,
Kiwis were playing, mate, is where I went.
yeah. It's interesting. I never really, West were one of those teams I didn't think about them at all. Like similar to St George, but they had Brendan Tuta, who was a great player
I
back in the
remember him, he
day,
was from the
and
Chathams.
yeah, he was. Didn't they have Clayton Friend as well, or was he at the
Yeah, I
Bears?
think Clayton went over there too, actually. Yeah, yeah, you might be right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can still clearly remember that first game for the Warriors in '95. I was at the Toten Upper Hut. Um,
No, the pub.
I was actually there for the first game of Super Rugby back in the day. I was there for the first Warriors game, and I was there for the first ever game you could bet on the All Blacks
Wow.
when the sports betting started. So it was a great place to be, the Tote. So getting on to the Warriors of 2023, we started sort of chatting when you launched your show last year with a bit of frustration over the COVID times about how the club was going and particularly around the Matt Lodge thing and the like. So it was a bit of an odd off season really when we didn't know Webby was initially coming and they'd already signed Marata Niukore, which a lot of people weren't too sure about because they paid big money for him. But then all of a sudden they did sign Webby and they started to sign a bunch of other players. How are you sort of feeling, around January this year once all that was starting to take place, but before we'd even seen the boys play?
Look, I to be honest, mate, I was very cynical because, and I've just the caveat on that was until I, got to interview Andrew Webster for the first time. But I was as frustrated as everyone else was last year, and I had a big row in a Zoom press conference with Cameron last year, and I think that made Fox Sports News, and it was just a fan who was just overwhelmed by the fact of just constant failure. And at that stage, we were going through that awful phase where Stacey was the coach, and it was just press conference after press conference where he was fronting up. This is, the biggest legend in the club with his head in his hands and this miserable look on his face. And he was talking about players not trying, players not wanting to play for the jersey, not wanting to defend, not wanting to tackle. And, I support Man United have had amazing success for 20 years. We're crap. Now I support the Redskins, for my whole life. And they've been rubbish forever. And so I'm used to teams not performing and not winning for me. But one thing I can't abide by, and this is why I hate these Man United players at the moment, mate, is not trying, is not giving 100%, is not going out there and actually earning your keep. Because as a fan, I'm turning up every week, and you're going to bugger off with your millions at some stage and retire, but I'm still here with this crap team. And so I was really frustrated that these guys were letting so many people down. And, to be fair, I didn't really realise the extent of the COVID thing. I thought that, those guys staying overseas, for the ones who had families, I remember interviewing Tohu when I was on News Talk ZB, and his wife sent me a lovely text or a message afterwards saying that, thank you so much, because I asked him a lot of honest questions. He was feeling lonely. He was feeling, all out of sorts and that. And I remember a lot of, talk back at the time, people were saying, oh, you should get on with it. And I thought, no, just chill here. This is a family man. And that kind of started to get to me. And I thought, okay, because most of the single guys have got, hey, you're living in an apartment on the Gold Coast or up at Redcliffe. I mean, you're away from the screaming kids. I mean, surely this is good for all of us who've had kids and things. But it was just that frustration, Zane. It's not falling out of love with the club. But I gave Mark, Robinson, the owner, big serve at the same time, gave Cameron George a big serve. And I've got to, big ups to Cameron especially. What I really like about him is he's man enough to actually cop a bit of stick and cop a bit of flack and cop a bit of emotion and not get to the stage. I've dealt with a lot of people in rugby. They just blacklist you afterwards. They're not men enough to be able to say, hey, here's somebody who's actually emotional and upset and angry about that. I'll just absorb that and actually think about it after. So, we've actually loved and made up afterwards. And I've been the first to actually give a lot of credit to those guys because if you talk about turning the club around, well, it starts from the very top. We always say that. But yeah, it was just born from that. It wasn't born from I hate the players or anything. I mean, I'm a normal fan, mate. I hate you, I love you, I love you, I hate you. But it was just the fact that you kept telling us all this stuff, and then we had Lodge leaving, and he was allowed to leave, and Reece Walsh was allowed to leave, and then Nathan Brown didn't know that Auckland was actually in New Zealand. He thought Vodafone was a suburb in Australia. So all of this stuff I was kept listening to and hearing, I'm just sick of this stuff. So that's where it kind of came from. But when I got the chance, and this is the privilege of the job, people, is I got the chance to interview Andrew Webster just after he got appointed. He did a lot of media interviews and that. There was something really genuine about him, Zane. It wasn't necessarily what he was saying about what he wanted to do with the team and that. There was something about him. I just thought, this guy's in the Ivan Cleary mode. And I really like Ivan. Got a great relationship with him over the years. And I'm not name dropping people. I'm sorry about that. But, I've got a great relationship because I get to talk to these people a lot and so forth. And I just thought there's something about this guy I really like. I'm prepared to, give him a hell of a chance. And then we had the first all-in press conference at the start of the year. It was in January, really hot day out at Mount Smart, and he'd been flogging the players for a couple of hours. And then we have these things called presses where the coach stands there and there's about 10 of us media rat pack guys standing around. We ask him a lot of questions. And I asked him a few questions, and just his answers they were a real person. And a guy that, I'll use the word genuine over and over again, a guy that you could tell cared. He had, regardless of how good he was going to be as a coach, I thought we might have just landed one here. We might have just got another Ivan here, a guy that's actually committed to us. Because I was really suspicious about another Aussie coming in about, what, is this going to be like, the Phoenix guys? You stay for a year and you're just looking for another job somewhere else and that kind of bollocks. So that's when I first started to think, okay, I'm not saying I'm prepared to give you a chance, but I just thought there's something about you that I actually like here, dude. And so let's just wait and see how this happens. And from there, look at what's happened.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I clearly remember the first time I ever heard him speak because I was still in Japan when he was one of the assistants, so I didn't see a lot of the, other than the games, I didn't see a lot of people, coaches in the media and the like. I didn't even realise he'd been an ex-coach, but I was on the 9th hole at Paraparaumu Beach one morning and I heard him on...
What a great way to start a story, people, isn't it? I was on the 9th.
I had to let people pass because I just stood there before I hit my shot into the green listening to this guy, and it was like I coach these leaders for a living, and all these things I try to empower them about communication and clear, concise, realistic, the empathy. He was ticking all these boxes, and I started to get the hairs going up on the back of my neck, thinking, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
To the point that as soon as I got off that, I knew we were going to make the 8. I just had this. Wow. You cannot not get up for a guy like that. So I went pretty early. We had that first trial against the Tigers. Did you see that game?
Yeah, I did. I watched that game. Yeah, of course. I watch all the preseason games. I'm that much of a moron. I watch everything.
I'm hanging out by them, but I mean, when you watch that game, it was really interesting because there weren't a lot of the top players in there, but we had Metcalf and we had Tamati Martin and a few others there. Can you remember what stood out to you about that very first game?
The crowd that turned out in Christchurch. This year to me, it's been about the fans more than anything else. And that just said to me, after the shittest season we'd ever had, it was such a miserable, depressing season because of the attitude of the players more than anything else. Those players, when Stacey said, 11 of them out there aren't trying. Well, there's only 13 on the bloody field, and the fact that still so many people turned up to watch and still so many people want this team to do well. That's what stood out to me. Because I always look at those preseason performances and go, of course it doesn't count. But the fact that, I think they got 17,000. I think they packed out Christchurch for that game. That, to me, was just like, okay, all right, I got to jump back on again.
What about this? Did you notice anything about the style of the football that was a bit different, or just the way we looked in that? Because they're normally a pretty, scrappy games, and people being subbed in and out. But a lot of players got big minutes in that game.
Fitness, that was the thing, and back end fitness. Which again, that was the thing that again I noticed in January when we went along to that training session and got to see the last hour of the training session. That to know that those guys had been out there for an hour and more before we arrived, and this was a hot January day in Auckland, I had a cowboy hat on. I was sweltering under the sun, mate. I mean, and all us journo types were sitting there, wanting water and stuff. And these guys were out there, and just how hard they were running, and the willingness as well to keep running at that. So I mean, I can't say, because everyone wants to say, oh, I could see this happening at the beginning of the season. No, I'm saying, you're saying top 8. What I wanted more than anything is I didn't want to hear the coach ever saying again, these guys didn't try and they gave up. That was my number one thing, right? The second thing I didn't want floggings. I didn't want 40 or 50 point floggings, right? I didn't want any more of that stuff. And then I thought, okay, I got to be realistic. We won 6 games the previous year. I was thinking if we won 10, that's a good stepping stone. I was hoping, and this is, I'm a glass Mr. Pessimist when it comes to sport. I was hoping for 12 and 12. My absolute miracle wish was 13 and 11, and maybe we're challenging for that 8 on a points differential. But I thought if we won 10 games and came with that attitude, then we've basically stopped the rot, turned it round, and now we're on the way again. So those were my expectations, mate, quite low.
I mean, it's interesting because I had just had this feeling when I heard him speak, but probably before that, when you heard the type of players we brought in, they weren't superstars, but they were experienced. But I just thought, and when I started this whole Warriorholic thing, was kind of a way to balance out a lot of the toxic social media attacks on the players out there. Just trying to, I said to myself, I'm a very emotive supporter, particularly live. I thought, I'm going to be balanced. I'm going to be passionate this year. But I just wanted them to be as passionate and play with the same level of heart crazy fans like me followed them with.
There you go.
So that was my genuine expectation. Like, regardless of outcomes, if they showed me the effort, then I was happy. And that's what really got me is, to hear a guy like Jazz be really frank when I interviewed him this year about the frustration towards the Aussie players and even Brownie, who just didn't want to come over and be part of the Warriors. So it wasn't just us who were feeling it. And again, I agree, the fitness really stood out to me in that first game in the defense. And just like we're playing in a different kind of pattern. So I thought, well, we'd never really seen a Warriors team so fit in a preseason, but it's a preseason, and we had a bit of a up and down performance against the Storm, and then we get to round 1 in Wellington. Turn up the stadium. I think we had around 18,000 there or something like that. What was your first impression of that genuine, real game of footy we played up against the Knights here in Wellington?
I wasn't all overwhelmed. I thought that it was a good gutsy win, but I didn't know at that stage. I couldn't tell. I thought, okay, that's the first of 10 wins that I want this year. But I wasn't like, oh, okay, this is going to be this fantastic season's going to unfold after that. I thought that they showed a lot of grit and determination, and they hung in the fight and did all those things, and I was really pleased about that. But I was, as I say, Mr. Pessimist, I just thought, okay, the Knights can't be that good. That's honestly what I thought after week 1. Okay, So, because it was only week 1.
Yeah. I think the thing that stood out for me is seeing the consistency and the style of play, which was very different than, it wasn't helter-skelter, it wasn't boring, but it was you could see what they were trying to do and the effort in defence that once they started to click and you saw Ponga come back on after he HIA, I just thought, this is a game in the past we probably dropped out of and would have thought, what could have been. And I think the 2 players that kind of stood out to me one was Braden Williami, was a guy that everyone thought was coming in as a, backup for the New South Wales Cup. And the other one was Jackson Ford, who everyone was like, who the hell is this guy? Why are we signing him? And they both sort of stood out as having some pace, having a bit of, something that seemed solid about them. So I was pretty optimistic, that this is a little bit better than last year, but not wanting to go early. But what was it, or which part of the season was it when you started to feel that things were a bit different and this could be a little bit of an exciting season?
Cronulla, Sharks away. Because I think we were getting towelled at halftime. And a bit of bad luck, but also just some dumb play. We were down at halftime. We were down, I can't remember the exact points, but we were down enough. 20 points, okay. We were down enough that we weren't winning that game because you had to score, I think, more than 3 tries or more, and And the comeback in the second half, I didn't turn the TV off, but I think I left the lounge at that stage. And then I kind of glanced back, oh, okay. And then I went away again and, oh, hang on a second. And then when Sean said afterwards, and this was the point of the season that it changed for me, and he said afterwards, and it was fantastic. I think we scored a penalty. I think he kicked a penalty to win that game. It was an outrageous win because we should never have won that game. Right? Yeah. And I think and he said afterwards something like, we were in the dressing room saying, what if? Let's just say what if. Let's say we win this game. What a story that is to tell our kids, to tell everyone else. When he said that, that changed everything for me because I just thought, my God, I've never heard, well, maybe I have, but it's been so long. I haven't heard somebody from the Warriors say that. And for him to say it especially, because you've got to remember with Sean, that we've all wanted him to have this year every single year. When he left the Warriors kissed him goodbye and said, find another club, mate. It was gone. He was never coming back here, right? He'd had so many frustrating injury seasons. He went to Cronulla. It didn't really work out. The back end of last year, when he gets injured, I think the previous year he got injured again, lost the last 7 games where he didn't play, where he lost. Then last year, he was one of those guys that Stacey was pointing at that wasn't running back in defence, and it kind of, and I just thought, okay, well, he's around again, But again, when we interviewed him, and after that press conference I told you about with Webby, the next one we did had Adam and Sean. And that was another one of these stand-ups. And that was before the first game, I think it was. And he came and he bounced in. He was full of confidence. And he looked really big, man. Like he had bigger arms and he was big. And somebody made a comment about that. And he said, I'm looking pretty good, aren't I? And we all kind of laughed. And I asked him at the very end of it, I said, are you going to say it's our year? And he wouldn't say it. And I said, come on, say it. It's our year. Because that was the joke at the time. That was the Warriors' standard strapline. It wasn't up the wires. It was, it's our year, right? I mean, that's what the black humour that Warriors fans have, which I just think is gorgeous. It was always that. And then there was just something that, because I asked Andrew Webster that very first press conference, the last question of it was, I said, what about Sean? We've got to talk about Sean. And he actually, I've kept this quote. He said, that he's got an opportunity like everyone else has, to take that number 7 jersey. And if he wants it and he takes it and he beats everyone else out for it, well, then it's his. And so it sounded to me even then that it wasn't firm or totally committed that Sean was that guy. But, once I saw him after that Cronulla game say what he said, and especially how influential he was in that comeback, that was the moment that I actually thought, wow. I mean, because you don't want false hope and you don't want to believe things, and because all our sports teams crap on your head the moment that you actually, start loving them again, that they turn their back and they run off to the other boyfriend. But, that was the moment for me, mate, okay? That early Cronulla game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that may have been the game that I went out and did some tree pruning and had to listen to it on the radio for a few minutes with those early tries. But it was interesting this year, to do these previews and reviews. I always watched every game again, sometimes a couple of times, and without the emotion, you see a lot of things.
Does your wife put up with this?
Well, she loves it, mate, because she doesn't have to deal with me. But seeing back in the day, I would have been all over the outside backs, calling them useless, which a lot of the fans were. But then when you actually see how Nico Hines was creating those tries, it was all in the middles. I
might just get a refill. Actually, I've got a barmaid here who might just give me a bit of a. She just gave me this, mate. As long as I get the drink, I'll be happy.
Yeah, mate, it was so.
No, I should wait for that. Thanks, though.
So yeah, but seeing how that was happening, and but the boys, like we saw it a lot of times in the second halves that they'd go back and they'd get. Webby would say something to get them back on the game plan, and all of a sudden they'd simplify it, they'd get their numbers right. And I just still remember I don't know if it was the last try we got or the first try in that run, that it started on our own line. I think it was a 7-tackle set, and our backs just punched it up the middle, up the middle, up the middle. Then our forwards hit the last couple, and we were just right up there, and we spun it wide, and it was just a try that we'd never seen the Warriors score. We would have scored that try from throwing it through about 50 sets of hands. So that started to give me a bit of hope. And I think getting back to Sean Johnson, one of the things that stood out for me was his defense,
Yeah.
How he would literally put shoulders into big back rows coming at him. I thought, wow, this is a bit different from him. So For me, it was a real turning point that started to give me hope. And that's, I guess, where we went, I think it was 4 from 5 to begin with. Then we went 5 from 10 and we started to drop down a little bit. Then we started to just grind out wins. And then we ended up with, was it 16 wins and 8 losses, which far
Wow.
exceeded,
Yeah.
everything we could have dreamed of. And
Like,
if
can I
you
just,
look,
I'll just interrupt you? The second thing that got me was we had a patch there. I think we were 6-2, might have been. I might be corrected here. We played Melbourne, Penrith, and the Roosters back to back to back. We played 3 games. And I remember thinking that this is the real tale of the tape, how we do these games. We didn't win any of those games, but we never got belted in any of those games. I think we kept them to around under 20 points in each of those games. Yeah. That was turning point number 2 for me. That's when I thought, hang on a second, because these 3 teams last year would have put 40 on us, and they didn't. So that was the Cronulla game. Then even though we'd lost those games, all of a sudden I was thinking, maybe. Then we got on that roll where I think we won, we lost 2 of the last 14 or something crazy like that. Was it 2 or...
Yeah, it was. I agree like that, particularly the Panthers game coming up. I think it's like 3 games in 11 days I think we'd been up to North Queensland, and then you play the Storm, then the Roosters, and then the Panthers. And we were in that game against the Panthers.
That North Queensland game was significant, Zane, because in that heat, I think after 55 minutes, we didn't concede a point or something like that, or we didn't concede a point in the second half or something like that. So again, that showed the fitness levels of this team and the commitment levels of this team. So everyone's got moments during the season where they sit there and they go, okay, that. And everyone's got different moments, and I really love this about fans. But there was another one. A lot of people might think, oh, that's pretty insignificant. But for me, it wasn't, because it was the heat that day, playing against the Cowboys side, which, remember, the previous year had a hell of a season. They'd come right back and had a hell of a season. So that was another one. Those away games, you've got to remember that I think the Warriors had only won 2 away from home in about 120 years or something. So to win those games on the road, not easy places to go, bro. No. None of these places are easy to go. I've got another. I know you're going to ask me a little later on about, one of my the favourite kind of memories or something, or what I remember the most. And one of them was an away game. I'll tell you that story in a bit and tell you why.
Yeah. Look, I want to try to take a little bit of a different tack now. So we will get on to like what your moments were and your players were of the season, whatever. But I'd like to switch it on to the movement, we'll call it now, the up the wires movement, and the bandwagon, whatever you want to call it. Being in the media, did you feel like a shift in the force of more people wanting to talk about the Warriors, more texts coming in about the Warriors?
Totally.
Was it? I mean, I'm trying to think back. Probably 2018, was the last time we put a decent run at it. But for me, this feels completely different.
Totally different.
What was it you started to see, like, because you're obviously a rugby-dominated outlet.
Of course. Look, what you see that's differently is you just see that all of a sudden it becomes part of the conversation a lot more than it had been. And that all of a sudden, I noticed even personal life, and that people would mention this, whereas they wouldn't mention it. Or if they did mention it, it was always scornful previous, right? But you really did start, I think about the one that got me was Parramatta away. Now, Parramatta away was the first time I heard the Warriors chant coming through the TV loud. And I'm such a nerd. I sit there with a pen and paper beside me watching every game, and I'm just constantly writing notes and constantly thinking of things. And I remember it was early in that first half of that game, I was thinking, am I hearing that? It was coming out the TV. That was our mate Richie. That was the drummer boy. Okay, that was the guy that, everyone knows, Warriors fans, has galvanised the Sydney support for the team, right? And you heard the Warriors chant at Parramatta. Parramatta. Now, they've got a pretty big, loyal home fan base, but our guys were out singing them. And then the next one was at the Knights, same thing. And, even though we lost that game, you could hear the crowd going. That changed it for me, because all of a sudden it was like, wow, there's more than one of me. There's actually guys who are going over to these games who are actually, committed enough to start yelling and screaming at an away ground. Now, you mentioned the Premier League earlier. The most fun thing you can ever do at the Premier League is not to go to your home ground, is to go to an away ground. To go with the travelling fans, because those are the real fun guys. Those are the hardcore dudes. Because there's only a few of you, And you just imagine being in some of these stadiums and you're surrounded by, say you go to, I'm a United fan, say you go to Old Trafford, 70,000 capacity, they only let 3,000 away fans in.
Wow.
So if you go to most of these grounds, you only get a small part of the ground. It's usually the shittiest view part of the ground that they put you in, but it's so good. You don't feel this collective buzz you feel and this adrenaline rush you feel, that you feel like you're invading another country almost. It's weird. And so for those Warriors fans to all of a sudden be heard above the locals, that's another change for me. That was just like, wow.
What about the Gold Coast game there? That was just ridiculous. I think we would have had two out of three fans who were us. I think another one that stood out for me, not necessarily for the fans, but was that performance against the Raiders for Croker's 300th. That's one of the hardest road trips. It's like, they're such a grindy team. They're so emotive. You knew Ricky would have had them up there for to grind that win out and win convincingly.
So I used to write a column for NBR, National Business Review, and people are probably rolling their eyes going, whatever. I used to write a sport and business column, and one of the things was comparing the Super Rugby. Now that night, so I went to Shapiro's Bar, which is up on Simon Street. Now, just to give you a geographical lesson, if you don't know Auckland very well, from Simon Street to Eden Park, you can see Eden Park. Now, that night, the Blues played their quarterfinal in Super Rugby, right? So this bar was jam-packed. And what got me was the fact that everyone that was in there was Warriors jerseyed up and was watching the Canberra away game. So all of these people, sports fans, had decided not to make the trek another 500 metres or 700 metres to Eden Park. They were packing out this pub. And to start with, the Blues game started, it must have been at 7:05, I suppose, and then the screens were on that. At 8 o'clock, when the Warriors were ready to go, out of maybe 20 screens, 19 switched over to the Warriors, and the place just roared. My girl was there, Mog was there as well, and I was there with some mates from working at, and just the roar went up when their screens went over. And again, that's, to me, another shift that I got, that, hang on a second, I wrote a column saying this team has taken over the town. This is a league town, not a rugby town. The evidence is in front of you. They can get hardly a crowd at Eden Park. There are less than 10,000, and yet the pub is full of people watching the Wars play a regulation season game away at Canberra. And God, we were good that night. We were really good that night. So, these are moments, and now that you reminded me throughout the season, but that particular game and that particular pub was one of the first indications that I got, hang on a second. And, I'm a real nerd in terms of, I'm a great observer of when I'm at these things of who's there. So I look for demographics. What are the ages of people? What's the male-female split? Probably about 80 to 20, 75 to 25 in favour of the boys, favour of males. But the age group probably about early 20s to sort of over 50. And it was all Wars. And so I'm looking around at all these people going, shouldn't we all be at the rugby? But we're not. We've made a conscious decision to come here and watch this Warriors game. Now, I'm not hacking rugby. I'm not, because it's too easy to do. People have hacked the Warriors for years, and it's too easy to do. I'm not hacking rugby at all. I'm just saying I'm making an observation. That's all.
So I've never been to a Warriors game before 2019 because I was in Japan my whole life. So I went to the Sharks game in Wellington back before COVID. And I literally walked out of that stadium, not being able to talk, trying my ass off to get a chant up. Not once did we get it going. Round one, we started to find a little bit of a get the old Warriors. It was pretty awesome to go to Napier because it was like all of these fans kind of came together and a bunch of pitch invaders. A little bit more chanting there. Then the Sharks was my first home game at Mount Smart ever. And there was a lot of cheering, but there wasn't a lot of chanting. But then I went back for the Manly game, and the crowd had really started to find its voice. And it's but that semi-final against the Knights, I've never experienced anything like that in my life, where there was never a quiet moment. And I personally started maybe 4 or 5 chants that it took 10 seconds for the guy next to me, and the guy next to me and my mate who I went with, he's like, man, you actually started chants, and the whole crowd got behind it. And that, to me, is something I really hope continues next year, because it will bring Australians to New Zealand to want to experience that. I mean, we even saw it in the Brisbane game.
and it's, again, no criticism. We're a conservative bunch in these matters, man. I mean, yeah, I always say you go to an All Black match and, not playing very well, should have won by 40 points. The whole thing about sport is that, and this is what I love about it, and I love about being a fan, is that, to me, it unlocks my inner wanker child, in that you're allowed to behave in a way that you're not normally allowed to behave. That's the whole point of it. You let yourself go. You can scream and yell, I hate you. I still love you at the end of the day, but I hate you now. And this is what I love about English football, and that there's being in the presence of a crowd that is, overwhelmingly on the same side, and you get that collective thing where all of you have one thing in common, that you're here for this and that reason. And I've been in crowds at Old Trafford before, wonderful crowds where I've bear hugged men, I've kissed them and slabbered over them and loved them, and the crowd is jumping and ripped us apart. I've never seen the guy again, and I've always loved that aspect of it. Just to let yourself go and have a lot of fun. I'm not into the bollocks of hating the opposition fans or anything like that. I love the razz and the banter, because here in New Zealand, you can sit next to I'm a United fan, I can sit next to a Scouse fan. We couldn't do that in England. We wouldn't even be allowed to go to the same pub. I mean, that's just silly to me,
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone to the Redskins a number of times, the Commanders these days. I went there in December last year, and there's a Giants fan. We're playing the Giants, and they dicked us that day. He's here. It doesn't matter. I like the banter. I like the razz. I'm not into that segregation thing, because I just think we're all humans at the end of the day. But give it some large and take it up the chutney if your team takes it up the chutney. You got to be man enough about that. That's what being a man is,
Yeah.
But also give it hard if you. But this is what I love, and that thing that happened by the time the Newcastle Knights game happened in the playoffs, I reckon that's the level now that the Warriors will see next year amongst their fan base. That people have decided that they can go to this team, these games, and just have fun and just be kids again. Just yell and scream for your team again. That's all it is. And this is what I want. Mate, I want this for the All Blacks. I want this for, whatever New Zealand
hopefully it does
team.
take off.
I mean, I hope so too. I'm about to go to Paris to watch this. I'm hoping that, the All Black fans in the stadium find a voice. The way that the Irish fans dominated that stadium with South Africa in that quarterfinal, you would have thought the whole country was in there. That's what we're meant to do. That's what I want. I just want to be part of a crowd, of a fan base that goes, that just giving it the whole thing. And so I think that hopefully what the Up the Wahs and everything has done this year is just let people know that you can behave like that and it's okay. Like, there's no, I have there. So look, my eldest son, just to digress for a second, graduated from Auckland University with a master's degree a couple of weeks ago. An amazing achievement for the Devlin family. This is the first ever that has got a master's degree, right? And I call them the kids, Zane. That they come across the stage. Well, they're not kids. They're 20-year-old. They're real human adults, and they come across the stage. They get their degrees, mate. And then normally a family member yells out, "I love you," or something like that. 5 minutes in was the first Up the Wahs, right? 5 minutes in. Now, I was sitting there thinking, no one is going to yell, "Go the All Blacks." No one. And if they did, it would be really weird, because we just don't do that with our All Blacks. Why don't we? Why don't we love our national team who've given us so much joy over the years? Why don't we do that? I'm not one of these guys who goes, "Oh, I like the Warriors, therefore I don't like this, or I don't like this, or I'm pigeonholed here." I don't do that, mate. I celebrate, and the sports events that I compare that Newcastle Knights thing to. 2009, All Whites versus Bahrain, qualifying for the World Cup, when the whole of Wellington went ballistic. 2015, World Cup semi-final, Eden Park, when we finally got to a one-day cricket World Cup. And I'm telling people I love them. I've never even met them before. I don't know who they are. They're thinking, "Who's this guy? I love you." No, I really love you. That's the nuttiness of it. If you can't enjoy that and embrace that, I don't know, man. I mean, that's why I'm a fan.
I mean, I look at it that the likes of Daly Cherry Evans and Ben Hunt said they'd never been to a rugby league event that came close to the games. That was even before the Knights game. other than State of Origins at Lane Park, or whatever they call it, Suncorp now. But you listen to that crowd last weekend when they flogged us. They'd cheer when there was a moment, but they were quiet. Can you imagine if that was on the reverse? That game was at Mount Smart and we'd beaten the Broncos like that. You wouldn't have heard people stop talking and
No,
screaming for a week. So I
yeah.
hope it
It's been
continues.
like it's done actually. I think it's in a weird way. It hasn't united the country, but it's all given us. It's given a lot of people something to, you know, jump onto. And I love every bandwagon jumper there is, mate. I just think the
Oh,
more the
get
merrier.
amongst it.
This is a
Get
big
amongst it.
bandwagon. I'm happy to move aside. Come and sit next to Daddy. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care whether you're a fan for a minute, whether you're a fan for a month, whether you're a fan for 10 years, whether you're a fan today and you're not tomorrow. I don't mind. If you're prepared to jump this right now, hey, welcome.
Get
You
in.
know.
Get on. So I'm going to switch on to forward thinking now. So I think we had a great season. You know, we probably exceeded our potential as far as individual ability by playing as a collective and playing a really strong fundamental game plan. But we saw that there was a gap between us and the Broncos and
Oh
the
yeah,
Panthers.
totally.
So
Yeah.
going into 2024, we've got RTS coming back. We've got Chanel Harris DeVito,
Welcome.
who by all accounts is looking. They look like they're beefing him up to play as a lock or a bench forward, similar to what Bailey Sirenen did. They're the only new players we've got coming in at this point. Are there any areas you think the Warriors could be, looking to strengthen over the off season, or
Yeah,
what they'll need to work on?
you know, you need to compete with those guys. And Penrith and Brisbane demonstrated it during the final series. Both teams smashed Melbourne. Both teams easily beat us. Okay, and let's not be silly about that. Let's be honest about that. We had moments in that Brisbane game where we got close on the scoreboard, but what did they have? 185 offloads? Come on. I mean, so I think that to compete with those guys, we do need to recruit. We have to go up another level. Now, whether that's through the New South Wales Cup or whether we get our own guys, but you imagine if we had two Adams. I'm not saying, I mean, I think that we did okay this year, but to compete at that level, you need an almost origin level players again. It's, look at all the comparable leagues around the world, dude. You're looking at Man City dominating the Premier League, or you look at the same teams, Kansas City Chiefs, the same teams dominating the NFL. You're talking about, the highest level of professional sport, that you need that level of players. Now, we're not going to have the origin players, obviously, because, good God, let the Kiwis play in that origin. I mean, we're playing NRL, but we're going to need players at the level of the guys that make the Dally M Awards and make the Dally M Awards teams to be able to compete at that level. How we do that, bigger brains than me are going to do this. Much better brains in terms of the analytical side of it are going to, talk about this. But that's what I think. It's no disrespect to the squad or the players that are there, but it's just a fact. It's just a fact of the matter. But now I think we're at the stage that genuinely, I think that the good Aussie players, the good young Aussie players are going to go, shite, I might have a chance with this team. Not only can I impress enough to maybe get an origin spot, but this team's in with the crack of the premiership. So it's going to be up to management now, I think, to really scout, to be really clever about who we get. I'm not necessarily saying, pick New Zealand players. No. I want origin quality guys. Payne Haas was recognised when he was 15 years old. We need to find some guys that are that. Because ultimately it's, and this is why, to me, my player of the year is the big fella, mate. I mean, when he appeared in that yellow shirt last night at the Dally M's, I'm looking at that and I'm going, dude, I mean, I'm a white guy. I want to be you. I want to be you. I love that man. I saw him actually in the street in Ponsonby about halfway through the season and gushed all over him like an idiot, like everyone does. But we need that now. That's the quality we need.
I feel like, and it's bloody tough because every one of those guys, in my opinion, stepped up for 80 minutes every week. And I hugely respect that. And I believe that Webby will genuinely believe he can get more out of these guys. But I feel like we do need that one more big bopper. and you look at the
We
difference
need
between
genuine competition for places,
yes.
Zane. We need
Well, I
every
think
week.
we've got
No,
it
but we
there
need
in
guys
a lot of,
we need guys at a Tohu level. We need guys that every week go, my God, I want to get as good as you. You know, and
yeah.
again, no disrespect to the squad, but that's the level. And I reckon that this is, I bet if you asked any of the players at the moment, that's the bar that they're raising. It's not what we're raising. I reckon that they're raising that bar and going, come on, you know, how close are we? We're one game and one team away from making a grand final. How do we get there?
I think there's two aspects of it though. There's one is this will probably be SJ and Tohu's last year next year, so the first window potentially closes when they go, especially SJ, because there'll be a gap down to whoever comes next. So do you go out and recruit a couple of players who are highly experienced, will have a really big impact for a short amount of time to raise that bar for that real challenge next year? Because, you know, who takes over at halfback and whoever does is a drop down from SJ, and similar with Tohu. So I think that we've got the extra 2 junior teams coming in, so we have 4 teams feeding them. So the long term will just continue to produce these top players.
Yeah, but we need short term, immediate term, mate. That's what we need.
I'm saying. So
no, I've got a lot of faith in Metcalf. I really do. I think this guy, give him the opportunity and give him the confidence in himself. I like him a lot. I think that I'm happy with him there. But, you know, it's an ever-evolving beast. You know, you look at the very best teams in the world that dominate the competition. Look at Penrith. Look at who they lost this year.
Every year for the past 3 years.
Okay? Everyone thought they lost. Who did Brisbane lose next year? They lose Farnworth, they lose Flegler, right? So those guys are already signed with the Dolphins. So they've already replaced those guys. Those guys who they've replaced are looking at the same level players. That's where we're at now. That's the mentality that we have to have.
Yeah, we'll get there. All right, I'm going to finish up by asking you a couple of quick fire questions that I'm going to give you 30 seconds to a minute to answer here. Okay. First one, moment of the year.
My moment of the year, Zane, I'll go back to the Parramatta game. And I doffed my cap to Richie Morgan and what he did. He gave me as a fan so much pride. When I heard that Warriors chant coming out of Parramatta Stadium, I just felt that, wow, you guys are the committed guys. I'm just watching it on TV back in New Zealand. You guys have spent the money, gone out to rat hole Parramatta, and you've actually congregated in numbers, organised yourselves, and you've done that. I have nothing but love and admiration and respect for those guys. Because to me, it's all about the fans. Every sport is about the fans. Because we're the people who are still here, regardless of when you retire or something, we're still here with our shitty old team. That to me was the moment of the season. That's when I actually felt for the first time like, wow, it's on.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that one. What about the game of the year for you?
Game of the year, I go back to that Cronulla game and what Sean said afterwards, what if? Because up until then, until he said what if, I didn't believe what if. But after that, when he said what if, I thought, he's a grizzled old veteran. He's saying what if. Maybe I just need to, stop being such a negative Nelly and actually what if. Thank you, Sean.
All right. Who's your up-and-comer of the year that sort of stood out to you this year?
Tohu Harris. Now, I know that people are going to think that's a weird thing because he's a veteran, but I'm constantly amazed by that man. He's operating. He's got more bandages than Lazarus, mate. He's got things around his knees. He plays like an 18-year-old in his mind. And I just think that if everyone in that squad had his head and brain, confidence and self-belief on their shoulders, there's nowhere we can't go. He overachieved at Melbourne. And then he came here and he could have been a passenger, right? And after last year, when Stacey was saying all those things, one of the guys he was never accusing that of was Tohu Harris. And so I look at him and I just think he played this year like a colt, as far as I'm concerned. Colt as in C-O-L-T, not cult, at CULT, that he to me said, he's the inspiration to me. If you can play like that at that stage of the career, if you can love the game so much, if you can respect the game so much, if you can appreciate the fans so much at that stage of your career, then that's the, every other player's got to look at him and go, I want to be you. I want to have your attitude. And so I can't speak highly enough of that guy. Again, Sean, all the accolades, all the praise, wonderful season, mate. But my two guys are Adam and Tohu, because I was going to say, I used to be a skinny guy. I'm now a flabby guy, man. But, I'm a white guy who just lives his life thinking, 1 second of my life, please let me be hard enough to carry the ball up just once like you guys. And those guys to me have been everything this year. I got man love all over those two. Probably the last thing they ever want to hear. But
I think Gus Gould, I think, picked Tohu actually as the player of the year for the whole comp. So who's your player to watch for 2024 and you think's going to take it to another level next year?
Chance. I tell you what, this dude has just, I have fallen in love with him as a player this year. I love his commitment. I interviewed him halfway through the year, and he said this thing to me, and I've kept the quote, and I play it all the time. I just asked him this kind of, I thought, an innocent question. What's it like coming to work every day? And he kind of just came out of the phone, like he just said, I go in there, and he said, I just love it. He said, I love being a Warrior. I love walking in there. I love seeing Simon Mannering on the wall, all of these things. He, to me, here's a guy again who could have come here and just ridden it, But instead, I just think genuine. I said that right at the start of this, that word genuine. That's what Andrew has installed in this team. And I think that guy, everyone talks about Reece Walsh being the best fullback in the competition. Yeah, and he offers all kinds of different things. You watch Chance next year. If he stays injury-free and gets the freedom, I just think he has the potential. He, to me, would be an Origin player if he was allowed to be an Origin player.
Yeah, I agree with Chance, to be honest. Like, I respect what Reece Walsh does, but Chance is
I want him.
What do you call it? Epitomises
Dane,
what a Warrior is.
I don't
He
want Reece Walsh
epitomises
back.
Warriors to me. Yeah.
No, I want Chance back. I want Chance. He's my guy.
And I love how Webby committed to him being his fullback right from the start. So it's going to be on to RTS to build a position for himself in the centres or the wings.
And isn't that fantastic? I keep forgetting we got Rog coming back, man. And, I've got all the love and respect in the world for that guy. What he has done, knuckling down in a sport which isn't a sport and continuing to play NPC says everything about Roger. Roger is an absolute thorough professional man, and he's going to come back and add so much to the club in every single aspect. And so I welcome him back as well. And also, Devlin, don't ever chop that baby, man, because look at you. You take that head off.
He's launching his own hair products brand.
If you could have some of Devlin for a day, you'd take it every day of the week, wouldn't you? Come on.
Alrighty. So I think we'll wrap it up there. It's been an awesome chat. It's nice to be on the other side of the microphone for once, and giving you a chance to sort of, share all your thoughts rather than you asking other people the questions. I'll chuck the links to Martin's social media. He's on Instagram there. I'll chuck the links to the platform, and definitely check him out. 1 to 4 p.m. Monday to Thursdays on the platform.
Podcast every night, bro. And may I say, look, we met in 2019 at the airport when you did me an enormous favour and got me into the lounge, and it was great meeting you. And we've been great mates ever since, and we will be great mates ever since. And what you've delivered every Monday for us. What I wanted this year to bring on the show was I wanted a fan. I wanted somebody who's just a fan. That's all. That's all I wanted. I just wanted somebody who could live every single week as a fan with your ups and downs and everything else. And you've delivered every single week, man. And I appreciate you. I appreciate every single person that has done something off their own back to be a fan for the Warriors this year. Because this has been extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it. I've been doing sport on the radio since we started Radio Sport in 1998. I've never seen anything like this, where fans have just taken over. Those spyware men. I mean, of all the stupid, nutty, weirdo stuff to do, I love you guys. I love, Anton with his Bunty for Appreciation Society.
Right.
I love Richie. I love all of you guys. and everyone that has just gone along and bought tickets, because you're the heart and soul of this. It's about the fans, man. That's what it's about more than anything. And the team knows that. And there's nothing better for those players than to run out onto that stadium and see, this is how much you love us. Look at this.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
paid in these economic climes with petrol's $3.50 a friggin' litre, supermarket prices through the roof, inflation rampant, all of these things. You paid your money to come and love us. And those players have responded to it. So I just say, more power, Warriors fans, eh?
Yeah, I totally agree. And then look, I'm looking forward to going again next year. I mean, it's one of the worst times of the year for me going into the off season. 6 months of no footy. We've got the Cricket World Cup and a few other things going on, but I can't wait till we get till about January. We've seen if we've signed a couple more players. We've seen the boys starting to come out in the media conferences. February for the first trial games, but I'll tell you what, our first home game at Mount Smart will be a sellout. Can you imagine the crowd as RTS runs out? Mate, we're going to have to make sure we're there sideline.
Yeah, we will be, bro.
Kick it off with the win, right? Thanks for joining us, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
Man. Thank you, man.
See you again next time.